everyone, it's Mike G here. Just here to show you some of my favorite techniques, some tips and some tricks. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, so when I first started out playing, I sucked at sweep picking so bad that I had to develop my own exercises. So I really tried to just do a smaller version of a sweep pick instead of doing all 6 strings. I just did 3. And I did this particular pattern that just felt good to me, and I ended up using it in a lot of different solos and songs in the future. So a lot of these licks that you hear today are going to be things I've used in previous bands that I was in, or studio sessions, or when I was just jamming with people and having fun. So we have 14, 13, 12. We'll just talk fret numbers today on 3rd, 2nd, 1st strings. Then going from 1st, 2nd to 3rd strings, I'm going 15, 13, 12. So the good thing is that 13th fret stays there the whole time, so it's kind of like an anchor point. I was kind of jealous one time because somebody I knew had an octave pedal and I love the sound of it, but I just didn't have the money back then to get it. So what I did was I had to kind of create my own octave sounds. And I was able to do this by tapping 12 frets higher from any note that I was fretting. And it's kind of cool to do. You just basically do a tap harmonic. So let's say I'm at the 5th fret of the 6th string. I'll just go up to the 17th fret, just add 12. I'm not that good at math, but you could follow the dots. And you could just tap right where the fret is. So you get a little bit of a blend of the tap and the real notes. So you really get this octave pedal blend, which is great. I've always loved horror movie themes and I've always loved synthesizers, so I've always loved the Halloween theme. I was one night just trying to do something kind of creepy. I remember I was in my best friend's bedroom on his guitar just practicing, and I thought, what would be a really creepy sound? So I started doing a 2-string tap and I ended up coming up with this. I thought that sounds like the beginning of a horror movie. I really liked it. So I incorporated it into the song. I actually started playing that, and my friend just started playing power chords behind it, and it became a song called Fail to Be, which is one of my favorite songs we used to play. Like I said earlier, we all have our favorite patterns that just seem to feel right off the bat. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's some epigenetic thing, maybe my great-great-grandpa played guitar or something. 4s and 3s always felt great as far as using them in combination for like a pattern. So 4s in particular always rolled really nice for me. And I always like those licks that kind of roll off my fingers because I don't have to think about it too much. They just sort of play themselves. And so I started doing stuff like this with 4s. Now it sounds really fast and fancy, but if you break it down, you're just doing 4 patterns coming back to the next note, doing 4 patterns up, and it's this constant ascension, 1 note at a time. So you play the first 4 notes, next 4, and just keep climbing like that. So the first time I ever heard Money for Nothing by Dire Straits, I love the sound of his guitar. It had this kind of rolled off, you know, when you roll off your treble sound or like a half wah sound, it just had these really cool overtones. So I started to just turn down my tone knob. A lot of people never mess with the tone knob. It's hard to see in this guitar. It's part of her black hair, her beautiful black hair. But I turned it all the way down, and then I started to play upper register notes. And if you do it the right way, it has this very interesting synthy sound with these really crazy harmonics rubbing together. And I've used this in a few solos, and it's always interesting, and people always wonder what the hell you're doing. Okay. Someday I swear I want to put out a whole instrumental album with just those crazy sounds bouncing around. And it might drive some people crazy, actually. Probably me. But I think it'd be a lot of fun to put that out into the world. It's a different kind of feeling you get when you listen to that. My hands were growing, and I was pretty young, but I was getting bigger and bigger hands, and I started to do finger splits like we talk about in a lot of the exercises. And I was really priding myself on being able to stretch really far when I played licks. So back then, I mean, now I can reach from 12 to like almost 24, but I feel like I'm going to break my hand, so not quite. But back then, 12 to 17 was a nice reach. And so I started to try to do licks that capitalized on that idea. And I began to realize that, you hit this octave point, which sounds really cool. So if you go to the first string, 17, 12, then you go to the second string, 17, it's an E, which is the same as the previous note you just played. If you take that concept and move it around the strings, when you get to the third string, you have to go to the 16th fret to get that octave sound. It creates an interesting sound. Isn't that weird? It's like a doubling effect. Later I realized it's the sound that Bruce Kulick uses when he plays Tears Are Falling solo. So I think I subconsciously borrowed it from that. So I started to do this walk down pattern with it. It's almost like a pentatonic pattern you would do, like a Kirk Hammett type thing, but with a stretch you get an interesting new sound. So play around with that, you can come up with some cool stuff. So I was big into the pentatonic world, but I felt like I kept doing the same stuff all the time. I wanted to put more expressive elements into it, especially when I started playing country and blues rock. Might as well have been booze rock back then, trust me, at some of these gigs. But anyway, what I like to do is I like to play within the box shape, and then when I go to the lower strings, I tend to do this reverse rake. It's kind of what John Mayer does too. It's like, so this, it's very important to get that rake. So it's dead strings till you get to your target note. So first practice that, then it's fun to do stuff like, I've done videos on this before where I have the vibrating hand trick, and it comes from playing Nintendo. So I used to push the button really fast to where my hand would vibrate. So I use those same mechanics when I picked one time. I just vibrate my hand, I'm able to do a fast tremolo pick from it, and a pick tap. So let's do both of those. Now it doesn't look pretty. I mean, your hand looks like it's going crazy, but it's not really the point. It's all about getting the most speed out of your pick as you can. Now I tremolo pick other ways where I use my wrist, but this one I lock it in, I lock the wrist, and I just do the vibration. Now because that vibration can be translated in a couple different ways, I also took my pick once, and I started to just tap the strings really fast with it. It kind of sounded like video game sounds. So it went like this. If you saw my video about all the different crazy sounds you can make on the guitar, the scariest sounds, that's one of them. You just do the vibration and you move it around the strings. It's got that R2-D2 kind of sound to it, I guess. I got so frustrated trying to learn Eric Johnson licks at one time because I could not play 5 patterns. He picks them, I believe, just straight up because he's a monster. He's awesome. But I had to find a way around it a little bit. So I kind of developed this economy picking way to do it in 5s. So it's a walk down in pentatonic mostly. It doesn't have to be, there are other scales you could play with it. But I would just do a 5 pattern that I ended up realizing it was economy picking that was allowing me to do it up to speed that I wanted to play at. So for example, slow would be, after the 3 first initial notes, then I start the 5. So I go like this. Then it goes, that's the 5. Now when you do the 5 pattern, the picking goes down, up, down, up, down. Down, up, down, up, down. See, so you have those 2 downs, which makes it more of an economy picking motion. In my early days, I loved the sound of octaves, but I felt like I was doing this too much. I probably got that from playing Ride the Lightning quite a bit, so I decided to break it up a little bit. To do the slide on one string, hit the octave, go back, slide again, and use it as a sliding octave trick, versus just going, I would now go. That allowed me to do stuff like, and by the way, that sounded really cool with wah pedal when I added that. It has more of a talking sound when you do that. Played in a country band for a while, and we actually started to write originals, which is kind of cool, but I had to come with some new licks, and I really love that, like I said before, those rolling licks. So started to use Travis picking, and I love like Brent Mason type playing, and I always respected his style. Sounds kind of cool when it gets going fast, and then I just added a tail to it. So real slow, it's... Hear all those unison notes in there? That's what's great about open strings sometimes. A lot of G's there. Then a few years later, I heard a Keith Urban, Brad Paisley song, and they have that same lick in it. So, I don't know. I want to say I did it first, but I probably copied Albert Lee or something. This technique I just did on accident. I was doing a live stream and I was just kind of fiddling with my guitar, and something kind of cool just happened out of nowhere. I just fretted a minor chord. I started going like this. And moving up and down, it kind of gave it like a ringtone sound. Now, of course, that's very Eddie Van Halen. He's a little more precise with when he chooses his notes, but this is just more of a sporadic 1-2 finger up and down. Just make it sound as crazy as possible while holding a chord. When I was in my early 20s, we shared a studio with this guitar player named John Hanson, and he played a lot of Steely Dan type licks. He's a great guitar player, played jazz and rock and blues and everything great. But he always did this pattern that I couldn't quite pull off at the time, and I always wanted to adopt it to my playing style. So it's really this doubling of certain notes as you descend. So instead of just going like, you're gonna double certain notes, and you get this if I go slow. That sounds a lot more like disco if I add wah pedal. That's kind of funny. Alright, we're on to the motifs. These are just repeating patterns that I tend to just do. Every guitar player has their handful of motifs that you just keep doing because they feel good, they feel natural. And that's why it's hard to emulate somebody else's playing sometimes, because it's not natural for the other person necessarily. So they have to work really hard to make it feel right. First one just starts off with a half-step bend, and then I do a series of pull-offs, but it keeps repeating. I usually end with that bend if I'm here. This is a big one. This is more of a diatonic run. And I started doing this because I was sick of the pentatonic box. I wanted to break out of it a little bit. So I started to do this pull-off pattern, and it became a circular motif for me. Those are the notes. Now if you keep it going and then move it around a little bit, it gets really interesting. It's a little bit like a Dave Mustaine type of sound, even though I think he would pick more than I do. I just started to do this circular motion, which we'll get to in a little bit. It's the good old Chuck Berry sound mixed with the pull-off in the middle. So you get like an Ace Frehley type thing, but I would use it in a very circular motion, and I believe I pick it differently than a lot of people. So I go down, 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 then an upstroke for the pull-off. Then I start over, so you get this. Add the wah, of course. Just sounds like chaos. I love that one. And this final circular motif, I used way too much back in the day. But it went like this. Here's the basic idea. You would do a hammer-on pull-off. You would go to a lower string and do a pull-off hammer-on. So you end up with this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And sixes are really easy to fit into a lot of situations. So you get this. So you see, after I got going fast, I could just pick once and get 6 notes out of it. So it's a lot of bang for your buck, if you will. So let's move it around. Now this next technique I use a lot will scream Kirk Hammett. He's a huge influence on me. But the way he picks is different, and I realized this when I started to try to teach this to people, and they all felt like it was weird for them. And so I thought maybe it's just something that I'm comfortable with because I just accidentally did it and practiced it a long time. So what it is, it's that circular motion we talked about earlier, but it's with certain patterns. So for example, if it goes like this, a lot of people would pick it like this. But I go, see, I just let my pick go down, down at a certain point. That screams circular picking, it screams economy picking. Now I came up with this out of desperation because I wanted to play Fade to Black at the school talent show. We never did, we ended up playing Ride the Lightning. And I couldn't play the end part of the Fade to Black solo, so I was panicking. So out of necessity, being the mother of invention, as they say, I came up with that pattern and it worked for me. And I ended up using it for a lot of years for a lot of different projects. I'm always looking for new ways to do bends, and one time I accidentally did this because I was trying to copy a fretted version of it. So here's what I mean. I wanted to copy this. So instead of fretting that, I tried to bend it and copy the timing of it. I ended up figuring out this interesting rhythm that worked for my fingers really well. Once again, let's go back to when I was kind of getting bored of pentatonic. I still had a lot to learn, but I was just trying to experiment a little bit. So I tried this thing where I would play a note and I would just fret it and then I would slide directly from underneath up to it. And it created this interesting sound that I call foreshadowing the note, because you're playing the note, then you're sliding into it. It's something I hadn't heard that much in the past, so I thought I came up with something new, but I think Satriani did it first, but... It's a great way to break out of the box a little bit, even though you're still in it, but you are moving up. So it gives you a chance to move around a little bit. Let's go back to that Fail to Be song. I think I put a lot into that for being so young at the time. But anyway, we already talked about the 2-string tap pattern, but I also put in this opposable movement tap. And it's something that I hadn't seen too much. I had a lot of trouble at first because I had to look at both hands. It made me dizzy. But once you get it down, it starts to feel natural. You don't have to look at both hands. Once again, that idea of a pattern just feeling right off the bat. For the song Swords of Sadness that we did in my old metal band, I started to do this legato pattern that made sense to me. A lot of players have their own favorite legato pattern, but mine was always this. So really that's all it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, another 6 pattern. By the way, this is a killer fretting hand exercise because you have to use every finger eventually from what I'm going to do, and it really forces you to have snappy hammer-ons and snappy pull-offs. So the whole thing slow would be... This isn't where I played it in the song, I don't think. It's hard to remember, but that's the pattern. So you start to speed it up. Sounds crazy with a wah. Now this next one is very similar to the one where you replace the note, the foreshadowing idea, but we're going to do it differently this time. This time we're going to go 2 frets or 1 fret below it. We're going to bend up to the note we just played, and then we're going to let it come back down. Gives you sort of an interesting bending sound. Let's do it here. I use this one so much it's embarrassing. I'm going to go up to the E minor pentatonic here. Let's say I play the 3rd string 14th fret. Immediately I seem to automatically bend the 12th fret of the same string up to it. I'm doing the old BB King type motion. Did you notice I added that little weird double bend that I showed you earlier? People hear 8-finger tapping and they freak out a little bit, but here's a great way to sort of fake your way into it. Take a very simple tapping pattern, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap with my middle finger, and then I'm going to just take my ring finger and I'm going to touch it 2 frets higher on the same string. And you start to break into the multi-finger tapping world. So instead of going like this maybe, just add the ring finger and try to hammer it down with a little bit of confidence. It's going to hurt at first. The next morning you're going to be like, ah, what did I do? And then pull off. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go middle finger, ring finger, pull off, pull off. Play with it, have fun with it, it's great. You might end up using your pinky as well. You might drop the pick and go full 8-finger. Anything's possible. All right, me and these octaves. Remember how earlier I talked about the tap octaves because I wanted an octave pedal? Well, one day I started messing around with the idea that the 12th fret is the center of the fretboard or the string. So if you look at the string, the 12th fret's going to be right in the middle. So I thought that'd be cool to write something where you could play the 12th fret, pull off to the open string, and come up with some kind of rhythm for it. I thought it sounded kind of like a Mortal Kombat type thing, and I started trying other strings. So very Mortal Kombat. In the song we used it like this. Pretty cool breakdown when we did that, but really it's just this. Or you could start with the open string. There's just something about that pull off to the open string that makes it sound exciting to me. Like I said, I played in a country band before, and I'm not going to go full clean sound for this, even though that would have been the situation for the band that I was in. But what I used to do is I would take any chord that I knew we were going to end on, and I would fret it a certain way and do a half-step bend on the G string to give it kind of a pedal steel sound. So let's say if we're going to end on A, I would fret close to like an A bar chord, but I would just do the 5th, 4th, and 3rd strings. And I would take the 3rd string note and I would actually go down a half step behind it. That way I could go like this. Isn't that weird? You're bending that up into the 3rd interval. I'm a little out of tune, but you get the idea. So we do something like... If it was going to end in E, I would go way up here. That sounded wild. Let's try that again. That one's fun because I added the open high strings too, so a lot of cool things you could do when you try to emulate a pedal steel, even though I'm using distortion in this case. Alright, we did some slap guitar one time for a band I was in, and my friend Tony Zaccardi actually taught me this on a real bass, and I just brought it to guitar. I thought it sounded cool. We do stuff like that, but in the actual band context, I believe I just went... I know it's been a long time since I played that, but it was always fun to incorporate a little bit of slap into a riff. First time I heard Steve Vai's solo album, Passion and Warfare, he did this really great bar dip that sounded like a record starting up. And so I started to incorporate that all the time, a little too much, like I do everything. I overdo a lot of things. But what I started to do was whenever there was a part in a song where I just had to settle on a chord, kind of like I did for the bend, I would do a bar dip instead, and it would cause this dissonance that kind of made you uncomfortable until it finally fit. So for example, if the song ended on D minor 7 or something, I would go. See how bizarre that sounds? After a while, I realized it's just a common Americana type trick, Americana type guitar playing. But to this day, I just love kind of watching people think you ended on the wrong note and then letting it scoop in. Plus, it's fun with a trem bar because you pick, and as you pick, the motion allows you to do it. One time my drummer and I just decided to write a song together, and it was a lot of fun because I think very rhythmically, and I just bought a wah pedal, so I wanted to use it. So I ended up putting the wah pedal forward, and then as I played along with the rhythm, I let it come backwards. It created this kind of interesting rhythm, and it went like this. Then later I went. That was fun because up until then I really used the wah pedal just whenever I felt like it, and it was just all over the place. But if I actually did it in rhythm, it created this new sound that I really hadn't heard up until that point. Oh, we gotta end it right. Alright everyone, those were my favorite techniques, the ones I could think of. Probably have a few more, but also some tips and tricks for you that you could use in your own soloing. Excited for you guys to try some of those out, and I guess we'll catch you at the next lesson. Alright guys, see ya.